Hi, everyone. This is Burak Begen. I'll be your host today for today's Quality Time with Daikon. When we talk about AI in quality, there's a lot of excitement, but there are also some real concerns for quality professionals like myself. And today we are going to discuss some of those concerns. We have data integrity, validation, regulatory expectations. There are a lot of things discussed around AI. And today we will be focusing on data quality and data integrity. And to do that, I'm joined with Nikolai Makaranka, the founder of Daikon AI. So Nikolai, welcome. Would you like to start with a quick intro?
Yeah, thanks, Burak. I mean, we're switching roles. It's unusual when someone
Yes.
introduces you instead of you're being the the one who hosts the whole thing. But thank you for having me, Nikolai Makaranka, founder and CEO of Daikon. Ready to start.
Good. So in traditional call systems, when we talk about data integrity, it generally means the data is complete, accurate, traceable, reliable. And how does this definition change or not change with AI? So what's your opinion?
I think it stays quite the same, and the importance is the same, and maybe you can argue that it's even higher because now with AI, what you get is any decision based on this data is going to be amplified and it can be automated. So you can really, if you have some mistake, you can really just create replicas of it all across in minutes, hours, much faster than if it were just human making a mistake, right? Because AI is very good at enforcing things and following some kind of rules or prediction pattern. If this pattern has something in it, you're gonna see it all over the place in these decisions. And this is why, if you look at other areas, other fields, why people are so concerned about bias in the models, because now instead of just one human making this mistake once in a while, having this bias once in a while, you have a system that will mechanically replicate it over and over and over again. And even in today's advanced systems, we see that in LLMs, there's a lot of alignment done to train them, meaning that we actually try to put the right value so you can see the sort of a correct bias in the way how they behave. You can see that it doesn't always work very well. So you can have this byproducts which are hard to really predict, even hard to discern sometimes.
Yeah, you mentioned bias, and I want to get into that a little bit more as well. But before we get into that, so AI systems rely on large and complex data sets. So the companies have their data sets right now ready. So what are the biggest data integrity risks you see before AI is even deployed?
Um, I think what the compliance piece of data integrity, what it focuses on, just to ensuring that your data is trustworthy and that it's not spurious or falsified or whatever. I think that's essentially the same focus would be for AI. Um, one additional need that AI brings is actually metadata around this data that you also want to make sure is following the same rules of data integrity and data quality. So you need to collect more data now, so that the scope of this need increases as well. And this is, I think, where lots of people don't really fully see that yet. So they look at this data as sort of one entity, but in reality, um, when you build an AI project, you would focus on some subset of this data, and you can pick, let's say, build a golden data set that would ensure that your model behaves in a way that is reflected in this data set. And this annotation that signals which part of the data are this golden data set is a record in itself, right? It is a
Yeah.
metadata that you want to preserve and want to make sure that you keep track of it and you have traceability around it, who make this determination and how it changes over time. Because one, I like this analogy about the AI that model is a compressed data set. It really highlights how much data is important when you train a model, because it's almost like a language that you communicate through with the model to teach it specific behavior. And if you want to change this behavior, what you're changing is data, right? You're not touching the model in majority of the times. You changing data, you adding additional examples, you making sure that examples are representable, and this way you ensure that the model does what you want. And data is the starting point of that.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned the AI basically amplifies things, and if your data is poor, the outcomes will be amplified in that poor manner as well. So, in your experience, where does poor data quality show up clearly in the AI outcomes?
I think the worst case scenario is when model predicts confidently, but the results are actually not good. So they do not reflect the reality. The model doesn't behave in the way how you want it to behave, and this is what we often big problem with LLMs, right? This is what people often complain about, where it's overly confident about its hallucinations, and sometimes it's very easy to spot and it's clearly wrong, but often it's very subtle. And I think we don't realize how many things we're not really picking up, some correlations, some statistical sort of dependencies that picked up that create this bias. And every time you get the result, right? Uh, or most of the times when you get the result, the model would sound very confident, and it's aligned in a way that it's meant to be helpful and sort of please you, right? If that's the right term. And that creates this byproduct that I was talking about. It is essentially a bias of trying to be a yes man, and it's very sort of convenient for us to use this kind of models, right? It's always good when you hear yes, 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 and you always get positive feedback. And if you even made a mistake, they tell you, yeah, it's, your line of thinking is great. You just need to fine tune it a little bit. So it's much kind of nicer entity to talk to than many of the people where, feedback may be abrasive and harsh, sort of. Um, but yeah, I would say this is the most difficult case where the error is hard to discern. And given how far we went with the models, I think we will see more and more cases like that where you get some output and people just take it at face value without critical thinking. And this is, by the way, I like to always look at the programming as a first sort of canary in the coal mine, looking at this industry, how it evolves, because adoption of AI is there just staggering, right? The transformation, even if you take the last 6 months, is just amazing. You might have seen in the news that companies start to cracking down on vibe coding, and not specifically on the vibe coding per se, but on the practices of code reviews and how much people are actually involved, because they let errors slip in. So they don't do enough review. They're not critical enough, and some bugs gets introduced because they just impress how good these models are, and they extrapolate this to every single line of code that the model produces. So this is where I think there's a lot of learning will have to be done, this human model interaction, and how you understand when you want to maybe challenge the model or double check or verify some things.
Thank you. I think you really mentioned something that's one of my biggest fears in AI. I see a lot of people using it. A lot of companies are using it. They are jumping on the Chat GPT Copilot kind of models, and they try to create agents out of these. And sometimes without enough background and understanding what can go wrong.
Hmm.
And I want to talk to you about a little more on this. So, since it is one of my biggest fears, and I'm sure it is very similar in the quality
Hmm.
atmosphere, like how do you ensure training data hasn't introduced hidden bias or noise
Yeah.
that would never be acceptable by me or anybody in quality?
Yeah. It's $1 million question. That's the most difficult part. Um, Let me maybe preface my answer with that one role that we should think about when we talk about data that probably we haven't spoken enough before is that data is the core of your evaluations of the models. And I would shift focus from training models, how data impacts training models, to data as the core of your evaluations. And this is essentially heart of your evaluations. Because what happens today in the industry, we get lots of pre-trained models already. So you actually do quite the little training or sometimes no training
Mm,
at all, right? LLMs, we don't really train them. But the role of data shifts to evaluation, where you collect this data, where you put together these examples that represent the behaviors or the results that you want to produce with this model, and you try to make sure it's a representative sample, right? The same like basic sort of statistics approach, where you when you test like linear regression, that there are no outliers and things like that, or if there are outliers, if you want to catch for them, right? But essentially, it really needs to reflect your business case, your use case, and this is how you ensure that the model works correctly. And this is easier said than done, obviously, because that requires, first, as we talked about, data integrity, data quality, plus it requires a lot of um, um, understanding of the process and how data manifests, how this process manifests through this data. So this is where I would say the shift in mindset should happen, where we look at this data is not as input but as a filter that helps us to understand whether the model works or not. And overall, if you think about the strategy that the companies should take around AI, I think a big component of it should be focused on evaluation, because I know lots of people talk about
mm,
models, what kind of models you use, and is it like GPT-5 versus Anthropic versus something else. Um, I think it's always a moving target. It's very hard to keep up with how fast the industry is moving. Even for me, being in this industry professionally, uh, they should focus on, okay, how, if we automate this process, what result we want, and how do we measure that whoever does that, whether it's human or a model or someone else, that this result is actually what we want. Um, so you really want to have these people who are, I'm not even sure how to characterize the skill. It's sort of technical skill, but it also very woven together with the business skill. So you want to have this like data savvy folks who would understand, okay, this is the metric that we use, and this is the data set that we use because it shows this, this, and that. And as you go through using this model, you would encounter examples that you haven't thought about, and you need a process that, okay, I want to take this example as an evaluation example for the future, because this is a sort of a test case that I want to test against to make sure that the model actually handles it. So you need to have this process. And I don't think we really, organizations today, set up for this sort of feedback loop with AI.
Correct. I think that will become really important because it's a very different skill set, right? As you mentioned, not every company is equipped with it right now, and they need to really think about it very carefully when they approach these things. So my next question is, how should companies think about data lineage and traceability when AI models continuously evolve?
Yeah, the new thing here, as I said, is this metadata around annotations. Let's say if you build this golden data set, okay, where do you store it? How do you mark that these records should be within this golden data set? Many things as well around, let's say, if you want to train a model or use these examples for in context learning in LLMs, what might be helpful is like having this justification and reasoning together with this with the result and data that you want to predict. So I think traceability of this part as well adds on top of just in general having good understanding of where your data is coming from and how you're going to use it. One thing I would say about traceability with regards to a specific AI regulation is that, let's say, Annex 22 draft guidance actually requires you to have this lineage of all the data that you used for the model that the AI model that is being used in your organization. Today, this requirement is very hard to fulfill. Again, take LLM, right? How are you gonna know this? You just won't be able to fulfill this requirement. So in that sense, I think regulation as well should be rethought with focus more on evaluation, because this is the part that companies and organizations that use AI should own and can own. This is a feasible requirement that can actually put very good control in place, and it will make it very practical and helpful, and will follow this spirit of the regulations that the authorities trying to put in place. So I would focus again when we think about data integrity and how you want to trace the data, understand where it's coming from. I would focus on this part. How do we get this evaluation data set? How do we use it? How does it change and why it changes? Is it because our processes, let's say, got updated and we had to reshuffle the whole thing, right, to reflect the new reality, or there's something else? So I think this part is going to be really important to understand how the model changes in behavior, because again, in the end of the day, your model is a compressed data set pretty much.
Yeah. So let's say you are advising a quality head, right? And what guardrails would you insist on before allowing AI to be used in a regulated environment?
Yeah, I think the best guardrails are going to be your people, probably, who first understand the data well and how it's connected to the process. I think it should be everyone's uh, job to really care about how this data is produced, understand how it reflects the process, and make sure that it actually reflects it well. Because there are many I've seen over my career quite a few cases where either the metrics or the data itself is very confusing. It's actually driving wrong behaviors and completely not reflective of what's going on. So definitely shoring up this aspect is extremely important. Then just repeat myself over and over again. Evaluations. This is
Yeah.
your ultimate control, that you can take the model, run it through your test cases, your use cases, and see you getting taking a simple metric like accuracy, 95% accuracy, and understanding why it's enough for your case. Because in some cases, 99 might not be enough, right? In some cases, actually 80% is okay. So understanding uh, this and making these controls and decisions around them data-driven is important, and I think requires additional skill set, which is, again, I would be curious to hear your thoughts on that, whether you would consider this technical skills or not technical. But it's definitely a combination of the domain expertise with some savviness in this area, and having these people having sort of these nodes that can uh, um, influence how this whole process works is the best thing. Don't be obsessed about models, about the latest things, because they change a lot, and this field is very empirical. Today everyone is hyping about agents. Believe me, tomorrow and you already start seeing it, papers saying, okay, agents do not work, etc. They break all the time, and this is just nature of how this field is moving forward. It's empirical, it's trial and error, and inevitably you will see things that everyone is excited about. Then they realize, okay, there's some limit to them, or they don't work well enough, and they jump to the next thing, and they try another something new, and finally they get to the result, like reasoning, right? That's haven't been a thing like 3 years ago, maybe. Now it is a huge part of how the LLMs actually work very, very well. So focus on things that in your control, your data, your evaluations, and things that don't change that much, because your business is not gonna, at least like the core parts of it are not gonna change that dramatically.
I agree, and I fully agree with you that the field is changing very quickly. Only a couple of years ago, we start to see the Chat GPT and these LLMs and how they integrated into our workplace is amazing. And it is improving. I fully agree with you. The right evolution, the right people's in place is very important, but you need to work with someone that understands both the data and the business itself. That's going to be critical. And as quality professionals, our role has always been to protect patients. And while we enable innovation, we need to make sure that the patients are always protected. And AI doesn't change that. It only raises the bar. So, Nikolai, thank
Yeah.
you for the conversation today. I think it was a very interesting topic on data quality and AI, and how we can help the listeners about this. So, and everyone, thank you for joining us for Quality Time with Daikon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Burak.